You've heard the pitch. The Carolinas are the last real piece of the American dream. Affordable homes, great weather, fast growing jobs, low taxes, a place where a normal family can still buy a house and breathe. That story was true for a while. But here's what most headlines don't tell you. For a growing number of recent buyers, that dream is turning it into a financial trap. Not a mild slowdown, not a cute seasonal dip. A real shift where sellers are stuck, buyers are frozen, and the math that made these markets feel safe is breaking in public. And when the math breaks, emotions don't matter, narratives don't matter, hype doesn't matter. Only numbers do. Today, we're taking a road trip through North Carolina and South Carolina to expose the 10 cities where the housing market is flashing red. Places where inventory is swelling, price cuts are spreading, rental demand is weakening, and the risk of buying the wrong property at the wrong time is rising fast. We'll cover cities that look stable on the surface, college towns, military hubs, state capitals, and show you why that stability is not protecting buyers the way people assume. And at the end, we'll hit one coastal tourist hotspot where the correction is so brutal, locals are already describing the future as empty buildings and desperate sellers. A place that looks like a paradise until you check carrying costs, vacancies, and listings. If you're planning to move, invest, buy a rental, or even just understand where this market is going, this isn't entertainment. This is protection. Because the most expensive mistake in real estate is buying into a narrative instead of buying into reality. So buckle up. Keep your eyes on the road. We're driving straight into the storm. And quick note before we start. This is not personal financial advice. It's market analysis, signals, data, and incentives so you can make smarter decisions with your own money. Now let's start the countdown. Number 10, Greenville, North Carolina. We start in eastern North Carolina, in Greenville, home to East Carolina University. On paper, a college town should be resilient. Students create rental demand. Universities create jobs. Hospitals create stability. And Greenville does have those anchors. But anchors don't stop a market from sinking if affordability collapses and demand stalls. Drive through the tree-lined streets near campus and you'll see a normal-looking town. Nothing feels like crisis when you're just driving. The warning signs don't show up on the sidewalk. They show up in the listings. One of the first red flags here is how frequently sellers are cutting prices. Recent listing data has shown a sharp increase in price reductions compared to last year, with reports indicating price cuts up by more than 25% year over year. That's not noise, that's stress. Price cuts mean sellers are chasing the market downward because buyers are not meeting them where they thought the market still was. And here's why. Greenville doesn't have the wage engine of Raleigh, Durham, or Charlotte. It's not a booming corporate hub. It relies heavily on the university and healthcare. Those are strong employers, but they don't create an endless pool of high-income buyers. At the same time, the local poverty rate is high. Census data has shown around a quarter of Greenville residents living in poverty, roughly double the national average. That matters because housing markets are income driven over time. You can inflate prices temporarily, but you can't permanently separate housing values from what locals can actually afford. Now add high interest rates, even if prices stayed the same, borrowing costs change the game. A house that was affordable at 3% becomes a different house at 7%. Monthly payments jump. Qualification becomes harder. Buyers either step back or demand discounts. That's when you get the freeze. Inventory sits, days on market stretch. And the absorption rate, how quickly homes are actually being bought drops. A healthy market clears inventory at a strong pace, but in certain Greenville neighborhoods, agents have reported absorption rates dropping into single digits. That means supply is sitting there while demand is weak. And there's another problem people overlook. The rental market is not a guaranteed safety net. A lot of investors assumed college town equals easy rentals, but vacancies have started creeping up and concessions are becoming more common. When landlords start offering incentives, discounted rent, flexible terms, perks, it's not generosity, it's competition. If you buy here today without margin, you're buying into a market where sellers are already blinking, buyers are cautious, and the local income base is not built to support peak pandemic pricing. This is how people catch a falling knife. They believe it can't drop here, right up until it drops. Number 9, Spartanburg, South Carolina. Now we cross into South Carolina and roll into Spartanburg, often pitched as the affordable alternative to nearby Greenville, South Carolina. And you can see why people bought the story. New subdivisions, fresh construction, the visual appearance of growth. But new construction is not always a sign of strength. Sometimes it's a sign of overconfidence. Spartanburg is dealing with one of the most dangerous real estate conditions: supply exploding faster than demand. Active listings have jumped sharply year over year. Local reports have shown nearly a 40% increase in available homes in a short time. That is a flood. And when inventory floods in, pricing power shifts to buyers, if buyers exist. That's the problem. Buyers don't have the same purchasing power they had 2 years ago. So builders start doing what builders always do when they're stuck: incentives, rate buydowns, free upgrades, closing cost coverage. Anything to move inventory without publicly crashing prices too quickly. But incentives are still price cuts. They just hide the cut inside the deal. Meanwhile, resale homes aren't moving either. Median days on market has increased. Reports show it up roughly 2 weeks compared to last year. 2 weeks doesn't sound dramatic until you remember what it represents: buyers stepping back. Then you add a third pressure: early financial strain showing up in distressed data. Foreclosure filings in the area have reportedly ticked up. Numbers like a 12% increase in a recent quarter have been cited. The details can vary month to month, but the trend is what matters. Stress rises when payments collide with inflation and high rates. Spartanburg isn't doomed, but it is vulnerable because overbuilding plus weakened affordability creates the classic inventory trap. People who bought at the top assume they can sell fast if they need to. Then they discover they're competing with brand new homes offering incentives and flexibility while their resale has none of that appeal. This is how markets roll over, quietly, through competition. Number 8, Fayetteville, North Carolina. Back into North Carolina, Fayetteville, anchored by Fort Liberty, formerly Fort Bragg. Military towns are often described as stable, and they can be because there's always turnover, and the base provides a steady population. But the same turnover that creates activity can create volatility when the math changes. Here's the key: military families move, often on a schedule they don't control. In the past, buying a home made sense because you could sell when you got orders or rent it out when you left. Today, that math is broken for many families. Higher interest rates have crushed buying power. Housing allowances don't stretch the way they used to. And if you bought recently at a higher price with a higher payment, you may be stuck if you need to move. Closed sales have dropped significantly. Local realtor reports have cited declines around 18% year over year. That's not people being picky, that's transactions disappearing. And when transactions disappear in a market built on turnover, you get pressure. Sellers who need to move become desperate. If they can't sell for what they owe, they're trapped. They either become unwilling landlords, take losses, or face financial pain. At the same time, rentals get saturated. When buyers can't buy, they rent. But investors also saw the military market and piled in with single family rentals. Eventually, you hit a wall where too many rentals compete for the same tenants. That's when concessions spread. Zillow data has shown a jump in rentals, offering incentives in Fayetteville, things like a free month or discounts, doubling in a short period. And one of the clearest signals is the price to rent ratio. If it becomes meaningfully cheaper to rent than buy, demand shifts toward renting and ownership becomes harder to justify. Fayetteville is resilient, but resilience doesn't mean a good time to buy. It means the market can survive. Those are different. Number 7, Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Now into the Piedmont Triad, Winston-Salem, a city with real charm and a real economy. It reinvented itself from tobacco into medicine, education, and a growing tech footprint. But markets don't just run on identity, they run on affordability and demand. The leading indicator here is what's happening to mortgage applications. Mortgage banker data has shown purchase mortgage applications down sharply in the region. Numbers like 22% year over year have been cited. That matters because applications are the front end of the pipeline. If applications fall, sales fall next. Then prices adjust afterward. Winston-Salem also got hit with investor behavior during the boom. Flips. Investors bought older homes, renovated them, and listed them at premium prices. That works in a rising market. But when the market slows, flips become inventory that sits because they're priced for a buyer who no longer exists at that payment. Search listings, and you'll see a meaningful portion sitting beyond 30 days. Figures around 30% of listings sitting longer than a month have been observed. In a hot market, that's a warning. And here's the deeper risk. Once investors panic, they cut faster than owner occupants. Investors don't have emotional attachment. They have spreadsheets. When holding costs rise and demand weakens, they cut. And their cuts reset comps for the entire neighborhood. That's when a normal slowdown turns into a price slide. Winston-Salem is a solid city, but the market got stretched relative to income, and now it's reacting. Number 6, Columbia, South Carolina, down Interstate 77 to Columbia, the state capital and home to the University of South Carolina. A capital city should feel stable. Government jobs, university jobs, a steady economic base. But stability doesn't prevent speculation, and Columbia has been heavily exposed to investors. Drive through neighborhoods near the city core, and you'll see a pattern. Rental signs everywhere. Institutional investors and large landlords bought homes here expecting endless rent growth. Now that rent growth has stalled and in some areas turned negative, some of those investors are looking for the exit. Local property management groups have reported rent softening in certain zip codes. Figures like 3% declines year over year have been noted. Again, the exact number will vary by neighborhood, but the direction is what matters. Rent is no longer rising fast enough to justify high purchase prices and high borrowing costs. When rent weakens, investors who rely on cash flow get squeezed. Then they sell. And when investors sell in bulk, inventory jumps. Listing supply in Columbia has reportedly risen dramatically. numbers around 35% higher year over year have been cited. That's a big shift. At the same time, days on market have increased sharply. Reports show homes taking around 50 days to go under contract, up from roughly 30. That's a massive slowdown in liquidity. When liquidity dries up, sellers start offering concessions, closing cost credits, repairs, rate buydowns, anything to close deals. Colombia is becoming a buyer's market, but only for buyers who can handle high borrowing costs and still have a safety margin. If you buy here as an investor without conservative numbers, you're buying into a softening rent environment with rising supply. Exactly the scenario that crushes returns. Number 5, Greensboro, North Carolina. Back to North Carolina. Greensboro, a major hub for logistics and manufacturing. The city looks busy. Warehouses, distribution centers, movement. But the residential market can still be quiet, even when the economy looks active. Greensboro is showing a key phenomenon, the lock-in effect. Many homeowners have low-rate mortgages. They don't want to sell and take a new loan at nearly double the rate. So new listing volume slows. Sellers hesitate. That creates the illusion of low supply. But here's the trick. Low supply doesn't create a hot market if buyers can't afford the payment. So the homes that do hit the market aren't necessarily selling quickly. Months of supply has doubled, moving from extremely tight conditions to a more balanced and weakening market. At the same time, price growth has flattened. Federal housing data has shown price appreciation slowing towards zero in some periods. And when inflation is still present, flat nominal prices can mean falling real value. You're not gaining ground. You're losing purchasing power. Another signal, canceled and withdrawn listings. When a meaningful portion of listings get pulled without selling, figures like 15% withdrawals have been reported. That's seller frustration. They tried for peak pricing. The market said no. They pulled. That tells you the market is not agreeing with seller expectations anymore. High-end homes are also sitting longer. The buyer pool shrinks when rates rise. Luxury becomes illiquid first. Greensboro isn't collapsing, but it is shifting from seller power to buyer power. And transitions are where people overpay because they buy based on what used to be true. Number 4, Raleigh, North Carolina. Now into one of the most hyped markets in America, Raleigh. Tech campuses, new developments, a reputation for being bulletproof, and Raleigh is a great city. But great cities still have bad entry points. Raleigh's housing market surged hard, and the harder it surged, the more exposed it is to pullbacks. Recent reporting has indicated the Raleigh metro median price has already dipped from peak levels, with some zip codes showing year-over-year declines, something people thought was impossible in the Triangle just 2 years ago. Why? Affordability. Even tech wages hit ceilings, and Raleigh's median prices jumped into territory where monthly payments became brutal. The affordability index dropped sharply, signaling buyers have reached their limit. Then there's new construction. Builders rushed in. Standing inventory is high. Reports show new home inventory at multi-year highs, and builders offering aggressive incentives. If you can walk into a sales office and get tens of thousands in incentives easily, you're not in a seller's market. You're in a competitive liquidation environment. Inventory in Raleigh has increased dramatically compared to earlier years, with reports showing large jumps versus pre-pandemic levels. Raleigh isn't dying, but the idea that it's immune is dying. And that matters because belief is what creates bubbles. Number 3, Charlotte, North Carolina south to Charlotte, the banking powerhouse of the region. Big skyline, major corporate presence, strong growth narrative. But Charlotte is facing a classic danger: supply glut. Not just homes, apartments too. Charlotte has been one of the top markets for new apartment construction. Thousands of units hitting the market can soften rents. And when rents soften, buying becomes less attractive compared to renting. Soft rents also pressure investors. And Charlotte has a lot of investor owned housing. Inventory in the resale market has risen for consecutive months, reaching levels not seen since before the boom. Closed sales have dropped year over year. Figures around 13% declines have been reported. Then you look at stale listings, homes sitting 90 plus days. In some suburbs, nearly 20% of inventory is stale. That's a major sign of weakness. And here's the bigger issue: institutional buyers. When big landlords stop buying, they remove support from the market. And if they start selling, they add pressure. Neighborhoods dominated by corporate landlords are especially vulnerable because when those firms exit, they can dump inventory, dragging comps down across the area. Charlotte can still be a great long term city, but short term, it's exposed to oversupply and changing investor behavior. Number two, Charleston, South Carolina. Now, to the coast, Charleston. Beautiful, historic, high demand lifestyle. But Charleston is facing two brutal forces: affordability and insurance. Coastal insurance costs have surged in many areas due to storm risk. Premiums rising quickly can kill deals instantly. A buyer may qualify for the mortgage until the insurance quote hits. Then the entire deal collapses because debt to income no longer works. This is a hidden affordability bomb. Buyers don't shop based only on price, they shop based on monthly cost. And coastal markets are vulnerable because monthly cost includes insurance, sometimes flood coverage, and often higher maintenance. When insurance jumps, demand drops. Pending sales have weakened and inventory has increased, especially in higher risk flood prone areas. That's logical. Owners try to exit before carrying costs rise again. Second home demand has also cooled. High rates and uncertainty reduce vacation home buying, and second home mortgages often come with higher rates or stricter terms. Charleston's local worker affordability problem is also growing. Tourism runs on service workers, but those workers increasingly can't live close to where they work. That imbalance becomes structural, and structural imbalances eventually force price adjustments. Charleston isn't just about charm, it's about math, and the insurance math is changing fast. Number one, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Now, the final stop and the most severe situation: Myrtle Beach. Drive down Ocean Boulevard and it looks alive. Hotels, attractions, condos everywhere. But if you own real estate here right now, especially condos, the picture's different. Myrtle Beach is facing a perfect storm: inventory explosion, oversaturated short term rentals, rising HOA fees, rising insurance costs, and weakening demand. Condo supply has surged. In many complexes, there are multiple identical units for sale at the same time. That's a nightmare for sellers because buyers can compare perfectly. And when buyers can compare identical units, the only way to win is price cuts. Price cuts have been aggressive, with many units listing tens of thousands below recent purchase prices. That's not just a correction, that's owners trying to escape. Why are they escaping? Because rental income is weakening. Short term rentals are oversupplied. Vacancies rise. Owners don't cover mortgages. And when cash flow collapses, the investment thesis collapses. Then you add the killer: HOA fees and insurance. Some condo associations have raised fees dramatically to cover insurance assessments and reserve requirements. Owners get hit with a monthly payment they didn't budget for. Even if the mortgage is manageable, the total carrying cost becomes unbearable. When carrying cost becomes unbearable, sellers rush out. When sellers rush out, prices fall faster. Foreclosure risk also increases when owners are squeezed by rising fees and reduced income. Distress tends to show up first in markets built on tourism and speculative buying. Myrtle Beach looks affordable compared to other coastal cities. That's why it traps people. But cheap price doesn't matter if the asset is falling and the monthly carrying costs are climbing. That's the buyer trap. Low entry, high bleed. What this road trip really shows you. Across all 10 cities, the story is the same. The era of easy money is over. Bidding wars are fading. Inventory is rising. Price cuts are becoming normal. Affordability is broken in many pockets, and the market is shifting from emotion to math. The most dangerous time in any market is the transition, when sellers still think it's 2021, but buyers are living in 2025 rates. That's when you see withdrawals, stale listings, concessions, and panic. So if you're planning to move to any of these places, proceed carefully. You don't have to fear real estate. You have to respect cycles. Sometimes the smartest move is renting while you watch the market reset. Sometimes the smartest move is buying only if you have margin, strong income, stable job, conservative payment, and a property you'd be okay holding through volatility. What you cannot do is buy because you're afraid of missing out. Because FOMO is how people walk into financial disasters smiling. Thanks for coming on this road trip. If this breakdown helped you, share it with someone considering a move to the Carolinas. Subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into the US housing market. And comment below, are you seeing price cuts in your area? Are listings sitting longer? Are builders offering incentives? Because once you start watching the signals, you can see the storm before it hits.